Hey guys! Today we have a character that I think is a fan favorite. I guess people either love him or hate him, much like in the show. It's Riven. As the show begins and we start to meet the characters of the Winx Club, most of them get along pretty well right off the bat, with some characters becoming best friends overnight or even feeling an instant spark of romance. Except there is an outlier in Riven. Even before we meet him, he has already put up walls against his teammates, without ever even giving them a chance to try to get to know him. The closest he has to a friend in our main group is Brandon. He's the only one that Riven can kind of get along with in their downtime due to his charming, friendly nature. But this is in spite of the fact that Riven believes him to be Prince Sky. And because of his hatred towards the royal family, Brandon's on thin ice. Even before knowing Sky's true identity, Riven was already feeling a growing rivalry towards him. So he only comes to dislike him more after learning he was the prince all along. However, there's also the question of how much of that dislike is genuinely about Sky, and how much is about Riven himself, or rather, him lashing out because of a different feeling he doesn't quite understand. Speaking of feelings he doesn't understand, Riven totally does not grasp the fact that Musa is flirting with him for a pretty good while. Her flirting is a lot of batting her eyelashes and fawning and trying to get his attention when they're in a group. She wants him to be her knight in shining armor and sweep her off her feet like how she sees the romances blossoming for Stella and Bloom, and how her dad did for her mom. But Riven really isn't interested in that kind of relationship. Despite all his shows of bravado and trying to be the toughest person in the room, he doesn't want a romantic relationship where he just feels like a bodyguard. He wants someone that can meet him at his level. So when Musa is trying to gain his affection by being sweet and cute and innocent, and like almost a manic pixie dream girl, she's actually pushing down the bold, loud, edgy parts of her that Riven would be more attracted to. And later on, he does get to know the real version of her after seeing her in battle is what causes him to start falling in love, even if he doesn't end up being the knight in shining armor that Musa ends up swept away by. His negative relationship with Sky, of course, means that he is constantly also butting heads with Bloom. She is one to fight people who disrespect those she cares about, and Riven is one to push someone's buttons through the people they care about. They're both so stubborn and hot-headed that it doesn't take long at all for them to start barking at each other like two little dogs every time the groups hang out. And Bloom totally does develop a prejudice against witches after a while of being on Magix. Not helped, I'm sure, by the way witches are in a lot of Earth cultures. So when Riven starts dating Darcy and hanging out with the Tricks, she's convinced he's a bad guy. The other Winx all kind of see Bloom as their, little sister, so they kind of agree with her about Riven, other than Musa, who is of course salty about Darcy, but still thinks Riven's a good guy. However, Tekna in particular really doesn't like him. She's best friends and roommates with Musa, whom Riven has been a major dick to multiple times, and when she starts dating Timmy, she sees how Riven bullies him both in and out of missions. Like I talked about last video, Timmy is a really sweet guy who was at Red Fountain because of his love of machines and passion for flying, and Riven sees him as a wimp. He's pretty desensitized to violence, and he's a skilled fighter, and Timmy's approach to being a specialist definitely doesn't fit his preconceived idea of what being a specialist is, and that makes him weak. To Riven, obviously. I mean, Riven has trained so hard to get into Red Fountain, and he sees himself as a top student of the school. So when he starts hanging out with the Tricks, he's unsurprised to find himself not just friends with the most powerful witches at Cloud Tower, but even dating one of them, which I'll talk about in a bit. He gets along well with the group, but the more they hang out, the worse his relationships with our good guys get. He seems pretty well integrated into the group, but when suddenly Darcy asks him to join in following Darkar, he's shocked. This is the girl he thinks he loves at this point, and he didn't realize she was legitimately a part of all of the terrible things that have been going on lately. He genuinely enjoyed her company and hanging out with her group, and not only are they working for the evil monster that has been terrorizing his school and theirs, but they also think there's a good chance he's like-minded enough to join them. That really messes with his head. And like I said in the last video, I like to add more diversity to my redesigns. For Riven, I decided that his Earth equivalent ethnicity would be Korean. I did take inspiration from some K-pop fashion for his outfits, but also for his hair. Because Riven's hair is interesting. I was actually at a Stray Kids concert a while ago, and I remember seeing, I think, Felix's hair, and being like, I wonder if I could translate Riven's hair into something like that. Because doing this series has poisoned my brain. And yeah. Like, because what is Riven's hair? It's slicked back with bangs, I guess. I thought the K-pop angle for Riven also worked on like a meta level because a lot of the fandom is ferociously into him. So yeah, I wanted Riven to be like typically hot. So I gave him that body shape that is like the upside down triangle. And he's totally the kind of guy to work out his upper body to get like big strong muscles, but then tend to overlook the lower half. Yeah. Riven is an Arachleonite from a very poor area. This kind of background is not uncommon with people from Arachleon. A lot of them are really struggling. I talked about it a bit in Sky's video, but it has embarrassingly bad sound. I'm so sorry, because I totally waited till the last second of my imaginary personal deadline and rushed it out, and I hate it! I promise I'm trying to be better with the sound. But yeah, anyways, Arachleon has intense wealth disparity and a very small middle class. A very common career path for Arachleon citizens is joining the military, which is quite well funded and seemingly very respected in the general culture. Endorsements from public figures and celebrities are plentiful, and it's presented as a way to build a good future to kids from a young age. There's a good amount of Arachleonite students at Red Fountain. Though they're not technically soldiers, it's a pretty similar vibe. It's basically a military academy. Riven wants to help people and have a stable home one day, but he hates the monarchy. So he thinks going to Red Fountain is his best chance at achieving those goals. And to be fair, at Red Fountain he does become a hero, and eventually he will have that stable life because of his experiences there. The area Riven is from is an especially apparent example of the class inequality of his kingdom. Both very poor and very wealthy people living in relatively close proximity. Riven's community, his neighbors and friends, all share the sentiment that the monarchy ruling over them is made up of greedy assholes who don't deserve the air they breathe. There are, of course, some people who weirdly are into the royal family and idolize them and stuff, but it's more common for people to be resentful and angry at this point after generations of hard times. This is part of why Sky was sheltered from the public for so much of his life. Like, it's crazy how many people's first time ever seeing the face of the prince of their country is when they start attending class with him. And they didn't even know because he swapped places with his gentleman-in-waiting. Riven is one of those people. However, there are other people he knows from home. And once word gets out that he's on a team with Prince Sky, their prince, they start to look at him differently. They talk behind his back in class and they tease him about being a puppy for the spoiled prince to play with. This, of course, just enrages Riven and makes him hate Sky all the more, but it also makes him get a lot more vocal and public about it. When he thought Brandon was the prince, he was pleasantly surprised and could at least tolerate being stuck on a team with a member of the royal family. But when he finds out it's actually Sky, after knowing him for a little while, he's like, of course. Riven blames King Erendor for how bad his life has been, but also he blames him for how hard his mother's life has been. The royal family has sucked for generations, so why wouldn't Sky be another in a long line of pretentious jerks? Oh, Riven's mom. He never really talks about her, even after a weekend away to visit. She raised him as a single mother. She had help from her parents at first, but they passed, and then it was just the two of them. She's a relatively young mother, and she works hard to keep them afloat while still trying to be there for her son as much as she can. Riven loves his mom, but he's definitely not the kind to just start gushing about her to people. And his heart-to-hearts with other characters are kind of far and few between, so they mostly get devoted to more plot-relevant issues and his romantic relationships. But I do think he would talk to Musa about her, and also probably Naboo. For his first outfit, I wanted to keep the very simple color palette that his Season 1 outfit has, but make the whole thing a lot, edgier. There's definitely a tech wear feel to this, which I think makes sense. He would want to wear, tactical pants. Also, crop tops are definitely a Riven signature. They allow for the full range of motion. Riven has trouble trusting people. His romantic relationships are the rare moment in which he allows himself to truly try connecting with someone. However, he still struggles with it immensely. His feelings are kind of foreign to him in general. He's used to just bottling up basically anything that isn't anger, so it's hard for him to recognize when he even has an attraction to someone before he can even think about maybe getting to the point where he lets his walls down. With Darcy, it was a bit easier since she's so upfront about her flirting. They first noticed each other at the commencement gala. She thought he looked cool and edgy, and after seeing him talk to Musa, she decided to approach him herself. After a quick conversation, she left him feeling surprised. Surprised at how much he was hoping to see her again. And it's been a while since I mentioned it, so I'll say it again. The Tricks aren't evil from the beginning in my rewrite. They start out as a relatively normal group of witch students, if not only for the fact that they were pretty well known around school. They don't really embrace the evil inside them until a bit through Season 1. So when Riven has his meet cute with Darcy, there's no real reason for him to suspect anything weird. Darcy does not use a spell to get him to like her at any point, by the way. But he's still so into her that it's probably part of the reason why he never notices Musa trying to flirt with him, along with what I said before. Darcy and Riven start dating after the Day of the Rose. Riven still has a bad wipeout, and Darcy runs over to him to help.
Wake up, Riven.
Oh, you saved me.
I mean, she is a healer to some extent, like I said in her video.
I'm all right.
Thanks to my healing powers. My name's Darcy. Disgusting.
It's also interesting that Musa isn't at this event. Not that she's entitled to him returning her feelings or even really having any insight into his dating life, but I mentioned because she totally thinks there's going to be something between them, and she's more of a main character than he is, so we would see her perspective more. Anyways, Riven and Darcy date for a while and have a genuine romance until, the Darkar thing. After they have a huge fight and break up because she asked him to join in their allegiance to him, Icy and Stormy lock him away in the dungeons of Cloud Tower. Which is pretty solid of them, actually, if you're looking at it from Darcy's perspective. After that whole thing is over, Riven starts to see Musa more as a potential romantic partner. I mean, he's been made aware of her crush on him multiple times by other people at this point. Throughout Season 2, they have a pretty tumultuous relationship, and by the beginning of Season 3, they've broken up and gotten back together a few times before it really sticks. They agree to be cordial and hang out in the group, but they just can't date. After a lot of character growth, they would realize how bad for each other they are, even with, or maybe in despite of, how much they've both changed since they met. Still, I think it would be pretty hard for Riven to watch Musa fall in love with Aisha, since She was the first relationship he had where he was able to soften up and be vulnerable. So he would end up feeling quite tender. Luckily, though, he's gone through a lot of character development and is now able to actually rely on his teammates and friends for moral support. And the character he bonds with the most in this time of being newly single once again ends up being the guy who was supposed to marry the girl that sweeps his now ex off her feet. As for his outfit, I think by season 2 he would care a tiny bit less about coming off as tough and intimidating, but I mean, he's still the same guy. Since season 2 has the Winx and Specialists spend some of their time on Earth, I debated giving Riven his iconic Union Jack shirt that he wears for some reason, even though he's from a completely different planet where there is no Europe. But I just couldn't do it. I hate that stupid shirt. So instead, it's a blue sleeveless top with a big red X across it, in the hopes of being visually similar. Plus, in his original outfit, Riven's belt has this extra strap on either side that I thought was cool, but I couldn't really imagine it translating well into my art style, so the X shape is on his shirt now. A major part of Riven's character arc involves learning not to fear sincerity. He needs to learn to be his genuine self and let people past his walls. He uses his idea of masculinity as a mask to hide his fear of being vulnerable. However, that mask isn't a complete lie. Riven wants to be a hero. He wants to help people and fight for what's right and be proud of who he is, but he doesn't quite know how to show his compassionate side. Riven worked so hard to get into Red Fountain, and he takes his education there very seriously, even if he is embarrassed to admit how much he cares. And he is a great specialist. He's a quick thinker, a clever problem solver, agile, stealthy, highly observant, a skilled lockpicker, and he's even great with the dragons and the other animals that Red Fountain has on campus for training. I debated on what weapon to give him, like maybe a mace or a morning star, something heavy for swinging, but I ended up choosing dual swords as a reference to Prince Zuko and his legendary redemption arc, because I can't help myself from referencing Avatar: The Last Airbender. I think they work for Riven for the same reason they worked well for the Blue Spirit, who, spoilers, is Zuko. And he specifically uses Niu Wei Dao, or twin oxtail sabers, which is what I tried to give Riven in my drawing. The dual swords are an extension of one's own wingspan, and so are graceful weapons that work well for stealth. The swords themselves are also a symbol of the two sides there are to the wielder. There is a side to Riven that he shows the world, and then there is the side that he keeps repressed inside him. He also dates a member of the group that is a consistent adversary to the group he is supposed to be a part of for a not insignificant amount of time in the first season. According to the Winx Wikipedia, quote, Riven's name might have come from Rivendell, which is a place featured in the Lord of the Rings books of J.R.R. Tolkien. Rivendell itself is the Old English translation of Sindarin Elvish Imladris, meaning deep valley of the cleft. Riven is also an Old English word that means to be torn in half. He needs to find a balance in himself. He has some not great ideas about masculinity due to growing up in a bad part of town in a country that already has more patriarchal views generally, especially compared to other local global superpower nation, which is feminist as hell. He doesn't think he's a sexist person, and he's not like a woman hater. It's more about having this grandiose idea of what it means to be a man. Being exposed to the others at school and hanging around the Winx Club is a majorly huge deal for him and changes his perspective a lot. He still considers himself a masculine man, but ends up with a much more positive idea of what it means to him specifically. And in no longer forcing himself to be a certain way he feels is expected of him, he realizes that maybe he appreciates masculinity in more ways than he thought. That's when he starts to see his bromance with Naboo is maybe actually turning out to be a full-blown romance. However, unfortunately, this video is long as hell, and I'm going to have to save that to talk about once we get to Naboo's redesign. But the basic idea is that Riven gets to be the knight that he wants to be for a kingdom that he can be passionate about protecting. My last note for his design is that I wanted Riven to wear his uniform in a more casual way than the rest of the guys, to tie into that fear of sincerity that I talked about earlier. He leaves the top of his zipper undone and is the only one of the guys whose pant legs aren't tucked into his boots. Also, from staring at the finished product for a while, I'm not sure the sheath even makes sense because I forgot he can turn off the blades of his swords. But that's okay. Maybe he leaves them on to be intimidating or something. I don't know. In conclusion, Riven is a very interesting character that I used to really not like, but after doing this redesign video, he's kind of grown on me. It's fun to have a character that's just kind of a dick, but he's so complex in so many other ways. Also, I spent so long on these designs, but I think they came out really well and capture what I wanted for his character. Of course, as always, I'm excited to hear your guys' comments, so let me know what you think. And if you like the video, subscribe and stuff. I'll see you next time. Bye!